السلام
السلام
عليكم.
عليكم ورحمة الله أهلا.
أهلا وسهلا ومرحبا, Youssouf. Where are you joining us from?
I'm joining from United States.
All
I'm from
right.
Morocco, but live in the United States.
All right, you're doing it. أهلا وسهلا ومرحبا. You're doing it. You're doing it. From the Maghrib to the Maghrib al-Aqsa. From the Maghrib al-Aqsa to the Gharb al-Aqsa. All
Maghrib.
right. All right. So, all right. Talk to us, Youssouf. What's going
So my
on? What's
question
up?
was about like
Yeah.
doing Islamic studies. So I graduated like recently, from engineering, and I would like to get more knowledge like Islamically.
Okay.
So I don't know. I think I was thinking about maybe traveling to Medina or maybe Egypt. I know you studied in Syria, right, for your Islamic
Yeah,
studies?
I mean, I did some of my study. Obviously, I studied a long time ago, so Syria
Okay.
was still. I went in the late 90s to
Oh
Damascus,
wow.
so back then Syria was a very peaceful place, and I visited Syria on. I mean, I was there for
Hmm.
a year and something, maybe a year and a half the first time, but I went again after, like, so I went to Pakistan, then I came back to Syria for about 3 months. So it must have been in maybe 2001 or 2002 or something. And then I went again, I think
Hmm.
2004 or something. But so that was the last time, or 2003, I can't remember. But in those times, it was obviously very peaceful. There was, it was still a place where a lot of people were coming to. Um,
Hmm.
it was in the days of Hafid al-Assad. So
Oh,
it was
Bashar's
Bashar
father.
al-Assad's father. Obviously, it was still very dictatorial, but people were very peaceful. There was there was immense stability. As far as I'm aware, crime was very low. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, but
That's what I
then
heard.
since, maybe whenever it was, 2010, 2011, since the uprising, and obviously now I think it'd be, I don't think you could go there. That wouldn't be not
Yeah, I think
not
Syria is out of the
not to
question.
learn. Yeah, so Syria would be out the question.
Yeah,
um
I'm thinking Egypt maybe or like Al Azhar or Jamiat al Medina, maybe those ones.
okay, sure. Medina, as in Jamiatul Medina University.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, I heard it's pretty good. I don't know. That's why I want to know your advice because I think it's better to go there to study than here in the United States.
For Islam, yeah.
Yeah,
You see, it's interesting because, how old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 25.
Young,
Yeah, I was gonna ask
fresh.
you actually if, like, at this age, I can still learn, like, if you
There's
can.
many things you can learn at 20, 25.
Good to know.
You surf it doing it. So, yeah, you see, it's interesting because, hmm, going abroad. You see, because you already have Al Arabiya, so you have Arabic, I take it. Now,
Moroccan Arabic is a bit different, but
oh, you have,
I do understand like Fusha pretty good, but not to the level of really like studying very well. You know,
okay, so, because it's okay, it's
because in
interesting.
Morocco we speak Darija.
Yeah,
It's
we
different
have,
dialects.
yeah, Darja. Maghrabi Darja is, yeah, it's very different. But
Yeah.
you know what's interesting and fascinating about the Maghariba is many of them seem to understand Fusha pretty well.
Yes,
And
if you start, because I study in the United States. If you study there, then if you go through the school, you study in Morocco. We study in French and Arabic.
yeah,
So then you learn Fusha and stuff like that. Yeah,
yeah,
mostly.
but I found like a lot of them, they can understand Fusha very well, and
Oh. Mhm.
many of them can speak it reasonably well when they're trying to with you, and some of them can speak it very well. And I'm talking about common people. I'm not talking about like ulama or something.
Okay. Yeah.
Uh, that's been my experience. I've found that they can speak it. Many amongst them can speak it either, they can speak it well, or some very well. And it's, so I don't know whether that's because I was like having a conversation about this with a good friend of
Hmm.
mine, Mamadou Tal. I don't know if you know him. He's studying. He had been studying in Egypt for many years, and
Hmm.
he's going to the States now to do his PhD.
Is he a sheikh?
So yeah, I mean, he's not a sheikh, but he studied several years in Egypt, in parts of Al Azhar, in other private, Durus Khasa, other things. And we were speaking about this very phenomenon. We were speaking about just the different kind of, darijat and these kind of colloquial Arabics. And he was saying, it's interesting. He said the same thing. He said that, look, he'd visited Morocco as well, and he said he'd lived for years now, probably I don't know, 6 years or something in Egypt. He said that in Egypt, in many places, they can't understand Fusha sometimes, and they definitely nobody will speak back to you in Fusha. And it's interesting because he said, when I compare that with Morocco, he said, I found almost everybody I spoke to understood me, and most people spoke back in it. And he said, maybe that's because the Darija is so different from Fusha that they do it. Whereas maybe Egyptians are so complacent that they feel that their Darija isn't that different. So they're not going to even bother trying to speak. So maybe that's a reason. Maybe it's just because they feel that, we don't need to speak Fusha, whatever. But I found even Egyptian shuyukh on YouTube many of them will not speak Fusha. So that's fascinating. Whereas
I think
almost
they're very
all,
proud of their
yeah,
Darijas.
like whereas I find most Moroccan shuyukh will speak Fusha. And maybe that's because the Darija is so different from the Fusha, the kind of standard deviation, if you like, from the language. But yeah, coming back to places, I was going to say, look, if you could get your Arabic sorted, which I think you will be able to do relatively quickly, because you have a base and you have obviously all the you just have to kind of fix in.
Like grammar and stuff.
Another thing I was going to say, I forgot to say, was just as a side point, maybe children growing up today with all the cartoons in Fusha help them, because cartoons are mainly in Fusha, aren't they? So in like Morocco and these countries, the
Yeah, true.
cartoons
Yeah,
they have for
that's
kids
correct.
have them in
Like the
Fusha.
news and stuff. Yeah.
Because I remember speaking to certain people in Fusha, and they were like, "Oh, it sounds like it, like in the cartoons." I thought, okay, that's great.
Yeah.
Right.
Same
So if you get the Fusha kind of ironed out quite quickly, then you can. I think that's a huge, like, you've already got a huge portal. You've got access to so much. Maybe even a bit of studies then, because you see, studying, then I think the studying becomes a bit arbitrary, because if you know Arabic, then it's more about, okay, the environment helps and also the schedule. So if you're committed, you have a schedule. Like if you live I suppose living in a madrasa, the benefit is you just have to show up. Then everything's there. Like I just have to turn up and the scholars are going to keep teaching me like clockwork. So it's just being there. So it's easy. And I guess if I'm living with more students, I'm talking to them. But for most students, well, living in an Arab country, what helps is the Arabic initially. So getting the Arabic. But if you can get that like just as a booster option, then maybe even short bursts of studies might be able to do the job. Like maybe like if you, for example, you started, like, let's say you had Arabic. Now that's not an issue. So now if you were committed, now it comes back to personal commitment. If you were committed, let's say you started, a person could even online, let's say you watch certain videos of certain teachers explaining certain books. Like let's say you did a fiqh book, a basic text. Let's say you did a nahu book. Once you did them, let's say you did an usul hadith book. Let's say you did some tafsir. Now you kind of up the kind of grade. You went to an intermediate level in these books. Let's say you started now kind of doing your own little research into certain things. You did a bit of tafsir, you started learning a bit more masail, you did an usul text. Now maybe you also contact a sheikh, you start studying with a sheikh. Maybe you're doing it via Zoom, you're doing it via Skype, you're still in the States. Maybe you fly out And let's say
Mm-hmm.
you flew out, but you went for only a few months. And in those months, you finished these things. You were living with students. Let's say you went for 3 months, for example. You
Mm-hmm.
went there. You're doing these things. You're doing that. You kind of 3 months is plenty to be absorbed into an environment. To really,
Sure.
if you're not kind of living a pure tourist epic lifestyle, then you can kind of get into it and you can read and learn and then let's say I don't know. I'm just giving a suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you went back to the States and you're doing some work, so you carried on some work, you generated some cash. This is if you needed to generate cash, and maybe you went 3 months to a different place now. Like maybe you went to Qahira first, and now maybe you went to in Tunis somewhere. There was a sheikh, like you reached out, you connected, you spent 3 months there, you kind of came
Mm-hmm.
back, did another 3-4 months of work. Meanwhile, online, went back. Maybe you visited, I don't know, Jordan. Maybe some things
Mm-hmm.
you hear of something there, and you go there. Maybe you go somewhere in Fez. You hear of some shuyukh there. You go to Fez, or now let's say maybe you stay for 4 months, not 3 months. Maybe what I'm suggesting as a suggestion is that this isn't very structured in terms of you're not going to get a degree by the end of it because you're kind of just it's a very scattered learning,
Yeah, I get
but
that.
the lived experience will be very profound because those, let's say, 4 months in one place or 3 months in one place will seem like years in a place. They won't seem like, just because it'll be so new, you'll be absorbing everything.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you come out, let's say you spend that in a different place, you absorb all of that, you ask all these questions, by the end of it, you are connected to so many different shuyukh that you'd kind of gone to, you'd shadow. And sometimes when you have, like, let's say now because you've learned so much, because you're learning, because you're passionately actively learning, you're
Mm-hmm.
inquisitively learning, like you're researching, you're googling questions. What is this, what is this, oh, why is this, why is... Now imagine, I don't know if money is a problem, if it isn't a problem. Let's say if it could have been a problem, that's why when you're back in the States, you're doing a bit of work, you're gathering more money to go back. Now, if let's say you're back in the States, you're there for 3-4 months, you're earning some more money.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in this situation, it's also easier. Now, let's say there's a sheikh, like you hear of this sheikh in Bahrain, let's say, or in
Mm-hmm.
Qatar or something, or let's say he's in the UAE, and he's a certain sheikh. You see, oh, this guy seems epic. Let's say you connect now. Now, imagine because nowadays you can connect with people. You send an email, sheikh, I'd love to meet you. I'm coming to this place. Now,
True.
imagine you ask this sheikh for a small window. Like if you said to this sheikh, I want to come and spend a year with you, sheikh would be like, get lost. I don't know who the hell
Sure.
you are. But imagine you said to this sheikh, I've been reading through your books. I've been reading through this thing. Or imagine there's an intermediary, and you say, like, if there's a person in the middle, you could maybe even say, look, I'd like to compensate this much if I could just spend 1 week with this sheikh, like for let's just say a few hours a day or whatever. But if you're asking the sheikh directly, obviously that might be a bit, I don't know, you got to gauge it right, because it could come off a bit inappropriate.
Harder,
but
yeah.
but you going to a sheikh in a very compact time, like let's say you target few sheikh, it's like targeted. Like I hear this sheikh is, let's say I hear sheikh, who's that sheikh, what's his name, Sheikh Naji from he's from the Gulf somewhere. I think, is he from Bahrain, or is he from Qatar, or he's from one of these places, or is it Kuwait?
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, he's a sheikh. He's done some tahqiq. Great sheikh. He's Maliki as well, but he's done some tahqiq on hadithi stuff. Now imagine
I see.
you reach out, say, sheikh, I really love to come see you. Now you take him some gifts. You see, because you've got the money to do so, and you're only there for a short time, there's a great chance you would be entertained. I mean, not entertained in the right sense, meaning accommodated. Because a person would think, oh, okay, because you can do that. You can kind of afford to come in with this kind of like a very, like a surgical approach. Like you're not scattered. You're very targeted. Like, let's say you've read some of his works and you've read this stuff now. And
Mm-hmm.
whilst you're there, you're working, you just want to discuss it with him. So you come there, you meet him, you've made contact. Let's say you give him some gifts. Sheikh, I'd love to just be able to just have some moments with you. Or, I've been reading your books. I just want to pick your brains on it. I'm only there for a few days anyway. So a person may think, oh, okay, why not? Come see me on Tuesday. Now you come see the Sheikh and, you've kind of charmed him a bit and you've kind of, oh, right, you managed to discuss with him and it's okay. So, yeah, Sheikh, if I could, I'd just love to sit with you again. Just to, I'd just love to pick your thoughts on this. Sure, you know what? I'll tell you what, I'll come back day after tomorrow. And you're there because you're only there a few days. I'm flying out on such and such day. Sometimes these things may give you so much more than you going to Cairo, let's say. And because I've spoken to people who go to a place and they live there for years and they've not really made connections with anyone because they just go to a ma'had and really they just know their own, that one random teacher in the ma'had. And then they go to this place and they know the teachers that come there, but those teachers are like, let's say they're not really significant. Nobody's really heard of them, let's say. Now, what I'm trying to say is, sure, that this way, and they become complacent. So it becomes passive learning. So if maybe targeted learning, where you've got the language out of the way and you can pick up the basics yourself and you pick up some intermediate and then you start taking sessions. Maybe they're online, maybe you go to a place, you spend a few months, because your time is limited, you will be pressed to do much more. Like if I got here and I said, well, I've got 5 years here, I'll be like, oh, okay. If I got here and I said, well, I've got to leave by August or I've got to leave by September and I think, or by October, I think, okay, damn, I better get on with it. I better go to this place. I better organize this. I don't know. This
also
is
you have to find a job too, right?
Yeah.
You need to have some income as well.
Yeah, exactly. So this is one way that, for example, let's say you were working in the States. Let's say you're temping, you're doing some kind of temporary jobs. You're just having an income, but you're just gathering some money to be able to live only for 3-4 months abroad and then come back. So in a way, it kind of affords these kind of these pockets of excursions, and also it allows you to diversify your excursions because because in years to come you'll be like, oh yeah, when I was in Tunis, when I was in Alexandria, when I was in Oman, it sounds, honestly, I love the thought of, I think that would be epic. If I don't know, it's a thought, but there's no harm in obviously, if you want to go enroll in a university, get a full degree and come out, sure. I mean, that's
I think what you say is a good idea too, because even in the Quran, it says to travel and see the world. So I mean,
you see, the way I'm saying, you won't come out of it with a degree, but to me, what is an Islamic degree going to give you anyway?
True.
To me, an Islamic degree doesn't give anything. It doesn't, like, there's no worldly income you're going to get from an Islamic degree. So at most, you can use it to become a teacher in an Islamic studies, let's say, religious department somewhere. But
I was going to say, I might want to teach in the future. I'm not sure yet.
Yeah, exactly. Sure. But I understand that. So you have to kind of look at all your own goals and pitch it accordingly. You have to think, well, you know what? I do want a degree. So, okay, how does that work then? And maybe you can work it in different ways. Maybe you could think, well, you know what? In that case, I know in the UK, we have an open university system where you kind of can study distantly. And nowadays, I think a lot of universities do because of COVID. So the OU we have here used to be much cheaper than regular universities. Maybe you have a system where, you think, okay, well, I could do a part-time degree and it could take me 5-6 years and I could do it in religious studies, but I'll do it abroad. I'll do it wherever I'm traveling. See, it doesn't matter because it's cheaper and I just have to do it abroad anyway. So, I mean, I don't have to attend anyway. So it's food for thought. But Youssouf, it's been great speaking to you.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Very welcome.
I was just going to add that,
sure.
I chose a career of petroleum engineering. So usually we work like 2 weeks on and 2 weeks off. So I thought with the advice you gave me, maybe like those 2 weeks I can use them to, do something like that.
May Allah give you more and more.
Yeah.
Ameen. Ameen.
Barakallahu fik. Shukran jazeelan. Thank
Likewise,
you.
man. Hayyakallah. Okay, Youssouf,
Salam.
take care.
Assalamu
Assalamu alaikum. People, that was Youssouf Zaidani from the States on Seeking Knowledge.